G'day, it's Gran here from Australia, just on my morning walk, and I thought I'd talk about anxiety, chronic anxiety, because that's something that many of us struggle with and it's been a lifetime battle for me, and it's only really relatively recently that I've been really making some headways with my anxiety, and for the first time in my life I've actually been able to sleep well and not get up heaps of times during the night to go to the dunny. So I just sort of been living with it, as you do. If something's chronic, you sort of think that's the way life is, and I'll just put up with it. So, chronic anxiety to the level that I'm talking about is a lifelong type anxiety that I'm referring to. So, with me, for example, I've always been anxious. And this sort of anxiety, we get that from our parents. Now, with my parents, I come from Belgium, and so my parents and my grandparents, they were heavily influenced by the war years and so forth, and all that drama, which causes a lot of anxiety. And that level of anxiety, I think that, from what I've read, that can get inherited and passed on through generations as well. A story about my parents, for instance. So, both my parents had chronic anxiety. My mum was especially bad. So her anxiety resulted in her being a very aggressive sort of woman, She had to be very much in control of everything. And if things weren't in control, she would just be very vocal, makes a lot of noise, or, the typical European mother waving the hands in the air and screaming type, So, and the other thing that was characteristic of my mother, she used to run everywhere, right? There was no walking, no slow walking or, sitting down, having a relax. She was always running, always on the go, moving around. Everything was in a hurry. Everything had to be, an emergency. She'd create all these, artificial emergencies, or what I call emergencies, timelines and deadlines, and everything had to be done exactly right and so forth. So, she... So she used to run around everywhere. Sorry, I'm just fiddling around with the gate here. And every day, she was like that every day of her life. Now, she's had an interesting history, because when she was born during the war, and, I was told about this story, and her mother saw a soldier getting killed in over the fence in the backyard or whatever, and as a result, all her milk dried up, and she wasn't able to feed my mother any milk. They took her to hospital, and they couldn't do anything for her in the hospital, apparently. And so she was on death's door, she almost died. And they gave her back to her mother, my grandma. And anyway, when she took her home, grandma had a neighbour who had a goat. And apparently they tried goat's milk. And the goat's milk worked, and she drank the goat's milk and survived. If she hadn't had that goat's milk, she would have died. So at a very, very young age, she was on death's door, and I think that anxiety was instilled within her nervous system way back then. Now, my dad, he also had a lot of anxiety, but it wasn't as obvious as my mum. He wasn't running around everywhere like she was. But his anxiety manifested in difficulty sleeping. So all his life he had trouble sleeping, nervous twitching, that sort of thing. So that's been passed on to me, and I've had chronic anxiety, like I said, all my life. So how'd that manifest in me? Well, putting my personal experiences aside, and everyone's carrying their trauma and so forth. Everyone's got stories to tell, which would have contributed. But even without any trauma in my life, I think I would have suffered anxiety. So with me, I've always had trouble sleeping, getting to sleep really, waking up multiple times during the night to go to the toilet, called nocturia or whatever. At its peak, when I was in my successful years, if you like, it manifested as a swallowing disorder. So I had a lot of problems. I felt like I was choking all the time. Anyway, there's a story there. I actually had some surgery at that time. It wasn't really invasive surgery, but it was called a throat stretching operation. But that didn't work anyway. I think he's just made some money out of me. But it was really bad, and no one could do anything for me. They couldn't see anything wrong with my throat. All the professional throat people, surgeons, I went to Sydney, saw all the, people who knew about throats, all the experts. They couldn't help me. So I was left with this disorder. It was really quite distressing. And then that sort of calmed down to, chewing my tongue at night sort of thing, So I kind of lived with it. I had that for lived with that for over 10 years, really. But it's only been in the last month or so, I've actually made big headways, and I've been sleeping through the night, and that disorder's completely disappeared. I'm finally finding my calm centre. The anxiety's been overcome since I've started this shadow work. Brain balancing, if you like, integrating the shadow. Jung's philosophy is that anxiety stems from the non-integration of the shadow. So basically you're sort of mentally running away from the shadow side of you that you want nothing to do with in your personality. And it manifests as chronic anxiety. So if you do the shadow work, you're working towards integrating that shadow, and once it's fully integrated, you've got nothing to run away from anymore. There's nothing to fear, So that's you might see a lot of the health things around is all about balancing and coming to finding that equilibrium in life, because that's all key, and the shadow work is all part of it, balancing the left and right hemispheres of the brain. So what I want to talk about next, why it's so important. Where all this is leading, I guess, is to the how would you say it? The shadow that is carried by the population, society's shadow, if you like. Society's shadow manifests in an underlying level of anxiety within the population. And if the society is controlled by a few at the top, which ours has been, and is in the middle of changing, I guess, then it's in their interest to keep a certain level of anxiety within the population, because with a certain level of anxiety, people are easily controlled. Why? Because if you have a certain level of anxiety, chronic anxiety, you're in what's called fight-flight mode, which is your primitive reflex mode, if you like. The body's in a constant state of alert and is very reactive. That means you will react without thinking a lot of the time. You will be easily influenced and manipulated. If you want to stop all this drama in the world and fix the world, you have to start with yourself. You know, you have to get control of that within yourself. Integrate yourself so you're out of fight-flight mode and you are not easily manipulated anymore, because that's the only way out of this. So, integrating the shadow is very important personally, so that the society shadow can also be integrated and we won't be so easily manipulated and by all these propaganda and all that sort of stuff. I've certainly, it certainly worked with me, especially when the COVID thing came around. You know, I was certainly in fight-flight mode for a number of years. I wanted to find out what was going on and, you know, beat them at their game, and always on alert, and I still am to a degree, I guess, but not so much anymore. Because, of course, that's part of the whole mentality of it all. So what happens when you're in flight mode, anxiety mode? Well, there's a number of things. Of course, you get a number of anxiety-related disorders. So when you're in fight-flight mode, you're obviously in a state of fighting, ready to go someone. You're ready to, or you're ready to run away from something. So you're gearing up. You're always on the go. You might feel like, you know, moving and running all the time. Like my mum, she was always on the move. There's also a state called fawn. That's the state that I was in. So the way I coped with my aggressive parents was to fawn. To fawn is to people please. So I would try and dodge mum's aggression by trying to manage it by pleasing her. And I became a people pleaser, peacekeeper type personality. The other thing what it can do is put you in freeze mode, where it results in being a chronic procrastinator. You can't make decisions, you can't move forward in your life, you're kind of stuck all the time. You know, that's freeze mode. So you're going to be in one of those modes if you're in chronic anxiety. And long enough in that state becomes a way of life. It doesn't have to be that way. Now, I'm getting on in my years, but even in my later years, you know, I'm 61 years old, and it's never too late to change. So after a lifetime of living with chronic anxiety, I can finally get on top of it. So Jung's idea that chronic anxiety is a manifestation of you running away from your shadow self. So obviously, if you work on integrating that shadow self, then it doesn't become a problem anymore. The anxiety goes away. Now what I've been doing, there's many ways to deal with it, but what I found worked for me is going on these walks every day. I go for an hour or two walk. I also do meditation and mindfulness. So there's always, part of me that's monitoring how I'm feeling at any given moment during the day. And if I'm in a state of mild anxiety, I'll question myself and ask myself, where's that coming from? What thoughts are going through my head at that time? Anyway, this process is certainly working for me. And, it's all a journey. And we can always relapse if we're not going to be, doing this on a daily basis. It's continual work. But it's definitely worthwhile. So just a couple of jokes to finish off. Why did the anxious mathematician bring a calculator to the party? He wanted to divide and conquer our social anxiety. Why did the anxious person always carry a map? So they wouldn't get lost inside their own thoughts. Because obviously, when you're anxious, your thoughts are going, they're roaring around in your head, driving you nuts, aren't they? Yeah, so once you get on top of this shadow business, once you become the ruler of your own kingdom, your own psyche, these sort thoughts quieten down, and you start to see the world in a completely different way. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. Don't like to make these videos too long. Cheers, see ya.